So, hi guys, this video is brought to you by AcetheCLAT, and in this video we would be talking about assumptions. Alright, in assumptions we would obviously be talking about introduction to assumptions, right? Then we'll move on to some important points to consider, and penultimately we would be looking at a strategy to selecting the correct answer, and we'll also do for some worked out examples, right? So, introduction. So the purpose of asking an assumption question is that the question requires you to mark or identify that particular option, mark or indicate that particular option, which must be true for the argument to be logical. I hope you know the concept of logical arguments, right? Okay, so let us move on to the characteristics of an assumption statement. These are, first of all, these are implicit statements, or they are implicit from the argument presented by the author. Okay, or you need to explicitly identify, matlab you need to explicitly mark that particular option which is implicitly mentioned in the statement, sorry, in the argument. ठीक है? And secondly, obviously, कि they need not be proved. ऐसे स्टेटमेंट जो आर्ग्यूमेंट, मतलब मैं कुछ भी अगर बोलूं तो मैं कुछ कुछ अजम्पशंस लेके चलता हूँ, राइट? जैसे अभी तुम ये वीडियो देख रहे हो तो मैं अज्यूम कर रहा हूँ, राइट, दैट यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर क्लैट और द कॉमन लॉ एडमिशन टेस्ट, राइट? सो अजम्पशंस उन स्टेटमेंट्स को बोलते हैं जो बहुत ही ऑब्वियस होते हैं एंड दे नीड नॉट बी और दे डोंट रिक्वायर टू बी प्रूव्ड, but a condition that is required is that they must be true. Okay, they must be true. So those statements must be true for the argument to hold. When I say must be true, I mean it. So to understand the difference between must be true or necessary condition and sufficient condition, which is this. So to understand the difference between necessary and sufficient conditions, let us suppose that the CLAT consortium comes up with a notification on their website that candidates need to have a minimum of 75% aggregate in their qualifying examination to clear the CLAT 2021. So tell me one thing: if a candidate does score 75% in the qualifying examination, would this fact be sufficient to clear the examination, or would it be necessary to clear the examination? I hope you are not thinking ये sufficient होगा, right? Because if it is sufficient, then thousands of candidates would clear the examination. But that is not true, right? So think about it like this. I say that if I invest 1 year to prepare for CLAT, I would get the law school of my choice. Well, is investing 1 year to get the law school of my choice sufficient, or is it necessary? Necessary, right, but not sufficient, because it would be sufficient only when I get such rank, right? But we need to secure that cutoff rank, right? And sometimes not even there. In fact, once that university needs to accept my admission, and then I also need to pay the required fees, only then my selection is guaranteed, right? So our example that scoring 75% in the qualifying examination to clear CLAT is necessary, right? Is necessary but not sufficient, or it is not sufficient though necessary. समझ पा रहे हो ना? Effect of negating the assumption or negating the correct assumption. So when we try to negate the assumption or negate the correct assumption, by negating I mean कि stating if the statement is in affirmative or positive, we try to negativize it or try to make it negative. Let us say that I say कि I would run 10 kilometers a day from tomorrow. The process of negating it is as simple as saying कि I would not be running 10 kilometers a day from tomorrow. Alright, and the primary and the most important effect of negating the correct assumption is that once you negate the assumption, the argument does not hold or does not stand straight or false, है ना? The argument का कोई मतलब नहीं है. And conversely, If even after negating the assumption, the argument stands straight or does not fall, it is pretty clear that that assumption is not correct or you have chosen the incorrect choice. Okay, moving ahead, let's take this example. Rahul says that Mohan will not become a good athlete since he does not run 10 kilometers in a day and does not eat good food. So our author is Rahul, and he says or he claims that Mohan will not become a good athlete, and the reason that he does not run 10 kilometers in a day and does not eat good food. So as I said, assumptions are pretty obvious things, obvious statements, right? So I want you to think about what is implicit or obvious from his statements. So pause for a moment and think about this. So what do you consider to be obvious from his statements? I'm sure it would be quite obvious to you that 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 good athletes run 10 kilometers in a day, right? है ना? ऑथर ने गुड एथलीट्स को किससे कनेक्ट किया है? रनिंग 10 kilometers in a day and eating good food, है ना? So it is obvious that a good athlete does run 10 kilometers a day, or a good athlete does eat good food, or even does both, right? Well, let us negate these statements to understand the effect of negating the assumption that good athletes do not run 10 kilometers a day, है ना? Good athletes do not run 10 kilometers in a day, or they do not eat good food. When I try to negate this, you see that the argument completely falls, right? That Rahul cannot conclude that Mohan will not be a good athlete, right? So that is how negations or negating the assumptions work. Now in this example, did you also found it obvious that uh, did you also think once Rahul starts running 10 kilometers a day or eating good food or even doing both, he will become a good athlete? Did you also think about that? Well, in that case, you need to think again, because again, this is a fund of negate sufficient conditions and necessary conditions, right? Running 10 kilometers in a day and eating good food is a necessary condition for becoming a good athlete. But from only this information, we cannot conclude that it would be sufficient to become a good athlete. Okay, let us move ahead. The bridge idea. I want you to think about assumptions. I would want you to think about assumptions that they are a bridge between two places or two parts of an argument, and that is an evidence and and the evidence presented by the author and the claim made by him. Think about assumptions like this, ठीक है? And they are obviously right कि यहाँ पे जब तक इसे तुम negate नहीं करोगे, bridge की हमें importance समझ में नहीं आएगी, right? Or we, as I said, we do take assumptions for granted. We think that it is quite obvious, but once we negate the assumptions or state the opposite or negative of the assumption, then you just cannot move to the claim from the evidence without the assumptions. यहाँ पे gap आ जाता है, ठीक है? That is how assumptions work. Important points to consider or to keep in mind. Okay. Common indicators. हर critical reasoning क्वेश्चन टाइप के अपने अपने कॉमन इंडिकेटर्स होते हैं. इसमें क्या पूछ देंगे? Which of the following must be true for the argument to stand, or which of the following is an underlying assumption, या which of the following is necessary for the argument to hold, and obviously which of the following is implicit from the arguments above. इस तरह से क्वेश्चंस फ्रेम किए जाते हैं. Wrong answers. Confusing you with the sufficient and necessary assumptions would be the question setter's best bet, right? But there are a few good ways of creating wrong answer choices. ठीक है? Extreme options and irrelevant. ये दोनों बेन के ही पार्ट है, right? बेन is the type of wrong answer choice created by the question setter. ठीक है? Bain, B stands for broad, A stands for alien, N for narrow. Alien मतलब irrelevant ही हुआ, right? And E is for extreme. So in extreme options, well, you might be served with a choice that which is too strong in itself, right? In that case, you should ask yourself, does this statement really have to be true for the argument to hold? Or a lighter or a lesser version of this statement would just work fine. And irrelevant may you need to be vigilant to determine options that are not relevant to the argument. So you need to be aware of these wrong answer choices. And a very important point is reading the question stem carefully. The difference between which among the following is the underlying assumption and which among the following is not an underlying assumption. You need to be very careful about that. A very simple tip, but can be very helpful, right? Because as you know, guys, every question matters, and I don't want you all to make these silly mistakes. Let us look at a strategy to select the correct answer. Alright, so the first thing is very obvious, that you need to identify the evidence and conclusion, because if you don't even know which two places to connect to or which two parts of the argument to connect to, how do you even make that bridge, or how do you even make that assumption, right? After that, the second part is to identify the gaps, if any. Okay, I'm talking about these gaps. If you find that okay, there is something missing, is there a missing link in the argument? Did the author miss some important links between the evidence and the claim? Okay, is the argument complete? These all questions will help you to identify the gaps between the evidence and conclusion. The third thing is making a soft signal. What I mean by soft signal is that just like the umpire makes a soft signal in cricket, right? You can also predict your answer, or get an idea of your answer by identifying the by performing the second step carefully. Okay, and then move on to the choices for confirmation. Negating the choices is the fourth step and is probably the most reliable one. Okay, as we have already seen, it is probably the most reliable one. The idea is that even after negating the option, the the argument does not hold. Our answer is correct, and conversely, if the argument does hold even after negating the choice, our answer is not correct. Okay, so that's there in selecting the correct answer. Now let us look at this worked out example. Minister says that we should not fund the attack submarine program. I disagree entirely. I can't understand why he wants to leave us defenseless like that. It is pretty clear over here that the author is this person who is disagreeing with the minister, right? He says that he is not happy with the minister, or he claims that he is not happy with the minister, and the reason or the evidence that he gives is that he or the minister does not want to uh, fund the attack program, and by doing so he is going to leave our country defenseless, right? So the claim is not liking the minister for not funding the attack program. The evidence is this will leave our country defenseless. So if you try to find out, we do have a gap over here, right? He links not funding the attack program with leaving the country defenseless. But यहाँ पे एक gap missing है, right? कि why is it so? So let us move on to the options. A says, not funding the attack program will leave the country defenseless. Well, this may appear appealing, but we have a similar problem as mentioned in the session earlier. Let us try to negate this, okay? By saying that not funding the attack submarine program will not leave the country defenseless. Could you identify this option? This option does not require to be must be true for the argument to hold. We cannot say that it is guaranteed. From this information, we cannot conclude or say that it is guaranteed that our country will be defended once we fund this attack program. ठीक है? So that is why this is not our correct assumption. B says funding the attack program is necessary for the defense of the country. Let us try to negate this statement. Not funding the attack program is not necessary for the defense of the country. Well, if this is true, then the argument is going to fall down, right? If we negate option B, the argument is going to fall down, because after that, why would this person be unhappy with the minister, right? Because his claim was minister does not want to fund the attack program. Evidence given is this will leave our country defenseless. If funding the attack program is not necessary for the defense of the country, why would the author be unhappy with the minister, right? This option pretty much fills the gap we have in this argument, right? So that is why this is our correct answer. C says, well, C and D are obviously incorrect now, but let us look at C and D. C says attack summoning program is very expensive. Well, the cost of the attack summoning program is not relevant here, right? That is why this option is irrelevant and hence not correct. Option D is also very stupid because it says that India should fund the attack program. Well, which country should fund the attack program is not mentioned in the argument anywhere. It is a very simple argument, right? कि minister से वो unhappy है because he does not want to fund the attack program, and his evidence is कि this will leave our country defenseless. That's all there is in this argument, and hence D also cannot be the correct option. So that's all in this example. This is our second example. It says that personal, organizational, and cultural values can create a difficult problem when trying to make a business decision that includes all the previously stated. All the previously stated matlab, to paraphrase, it is difficult to make a business decision that includes all these three values: personal, organizational, and cultural. Personal values are what the individual holds dear to them while living the types of lives that he or she likes and would like to lead. Organizational values are what is best for the company. So personal values are obviously personal, the kind of lives he or she would like to lead. Organizational values are for the company. It is what is best for the company to maintain a good public image and employee guidance. Cultural values are set on traditions, okay? Author is relating cultural values with traditions, handed down from generation to generation to preserve a way of living that each culture holds dear to them. Trying to intervene in these types of values when making professional and personal decisions in one's life can create a very stressful situation. Okay, so in this argument, the author starts by making the claim, right? And obviously that claim is in the first sentence. He says that these three values, personal, organizational, and cultural, can create a difficult problem when applied together to a business decision. Then obviously he tries to explain what all these three values are, right? He tries to define what all these values are. And finally sums up his entire claim by saying that trying to intervene in these types of values, these matlab again these three types of values, when you try to intervene these three types of values, it may create a very stressful situation while making a professional or personal decision. Okay. The question stem is obvious, right? We are having a session on assumptions, so the question stem asks us to identify the underlying assumption in this argument, right? Option A says stressful situations are caused only when humans try to please everyone, themselves, organizations, and society. Well, the author does not assume this statement because he merely says that these three values can create a stressful situation for a personal or professional decision. This argument does not seem to fill the gap, right? It only says that stressful situations are caused only when humans try to please everyone. Nothing is related to this is either mentioned, or nor does the argument require this statement to be absolutely true, right? So this is not our correct option. Option B says personal, organizational, and cultural values exist. However, human beings are free to choose and make their decisions by keeping in mind one, two, or all of these values. Let us try to negate this, that human beings are not free to choose and make their decisions by keeping in mind these one, two, or all of these values. Well, when we say so, we realize that the argument cannot hold without this statement being true at all times, right? When we cannot make our decisions by keeping these three values in mind, or keeping any one of these three values in mind, or even a combination of any two in mind, we cannot say that these values work together, right? And hence they cannot create a stressful situation, because in the last argument he has said he trying to intervene these types of values, trying to merge these types of values, trying to use a combination of these types of values will create a situation, will create or can create a stressful situation, right? So this is our correct answer. C says no such values can interfere with our decision making unless we allow them to. Negating this statement will not affect the argument, because the author is saying कि these three values interfere, but he does not assume anything related to कि ये यार ये interference voluntarily हो रहा है या involuntarily हो रहा है. He does not say कि ये है ना कि हमारे कंट्रोल में है या नहीं है. That is not the point of the argument, or in other words, this is not our assumption. And finally, option D is also not correct, because it says it does not matter what values you have unless your decision is making profits. Again, making profits is not mentioned in the argument. है This is one of an irrelevant as option. No such values can interfere. It is also an irrelevant, साथ ही साथ ये extreme भी है. So there we go. We also have done this second example. So thank you guys. I hope you found this information useful, and if you did found this information useful, please, I would again ask you to please consider subscribing to our channel and liking this video. Thank you.